Good morning, everyone. We're doing this out of a different studio this morning. But it's, even though we're only midway through the week, lots and lots happening, particularly around excesses from President Trump and his administration. Where I want to start is on what we call the reconciliation bill. As you know, we went through a long fight with the Trump administration over reforms to ICE and Customs and Border Patrol. We didn't get the reforms. I think reforms that most Americans have supported, which would include, adding body cameras, kind of not having ICE agents masked, having to operate on the same protocols that our police forces operate under. So even though ICE and CBP have got about $170 billion in the big ugly bill from last summer, Mr. Trump, along with his allies, have said they need $72 billion more. $72 billion that they're trying to pass through what's called the reconciliation process, which at the end of the day means they can simply pass with only 51 votes rather than 60. So we will go through either tonight or tomorrow the infamous vote-a-rama, where the minority, in this case the Democrats, will have a chance to offer unlimited amendments, and I'll be offering a number of amendments as we try to litigate this. In this bill, even though some of the Republicans are opposing it, there's $1 billion for President Trump's vanity project, his ballroom. You'd think spending $1 billion of taxpayer money could be better spent. It could be better spent, for example, trying to help out motorists who see now with close to $5 a gallon gasoline. It'd be better spent if we ended the war in Iran, where we made progress yesterday through my dear friend Tim Kaine's effort on the War Powers Act resolution. We finally got enough votes to procedurally tee it up to vote one last time to get it sent over the House. But I spent some time as well looking at what $1 billion. Remember, this is for the ballroom, the security around the ballroom that was supposed to be paid for entirely by private donations. But $1 billion, if we spent it here in Virginia, could pay for rent for a year for 46,000 Virginians. $1 billion could pay literally for the health care costs of about a quarter of all the Virginians who lost their health care through Medicaid cuts. $1 billion could pay for 2/3 of the cost of those Virginians who lost their health care through the ACA tax credits, all things that have been cut. Or $1 billion could literally pay for a couple of years of food for folks who've lost their SNAP benefits. So the idea, and we're finally even seeing some Republicans revolt against this, that we're taking $1 billion of your taxpayer money and spending on a ballroom when Americans are hurting as much as they are, is outrageous. And the initial draft took out the $1 billion because it didn't pass the procedural test. The Republicans are scrambling, trying to figure out a way to stick it back in. But this is endemic of the approach that President Trump and his allies are taking to kind of not caring about America's economic issues, and the president said it himself, and instead focus on vanity projects, focus on whether it's ballrooms or arches or other personal issues where the Trump family's enriched itself. Let me raise another one. Many of you know my background before I got in politics was in mobile phones. I actually started the company that became Nextel. So I know a little bit about cell phones. So a year ago, Trump set up another Trump scam called Trump Mobile, headed up by a CEO named Patrick O'Brien. And Mr. Trump literally solicited $100 deposits on this Trump mobile phone from about 500,000 Americans. Well, those Americans were wondering whatever happened to that money. And just recently it's been announced that they are going to start sending out the phones. They promised these phones were made in America. They're not made in America. They come with parts from China. Anybody who knows the mobile phone business knows, unfortunately, that's where most of the parts come. It will be assembled in America. There's no idea what the rate plan will actually be. There's no idea what kind of quality this knockoff phone will have. But this is one more example of the Trump family enriching themselves at the cost of Americans. So I have written a letter to this Mr. O'Brien to try to get answers. As somebody who grew up in the wireless business, I know this field, and American consumers need to be warned about this scam. And I think it's going to, clearly enriching the Trump family is going to do nothing to provide better, cheaper, American-made wireless service. And then, the last of the, not the last, but the other outrageous effort by Mr. Trump to enrich himself or his allies. You may recall that President Donald Trump brought a $10 billion lawsuit against his own IRS, filed this suit, then went into negotiations with his Justice Department and settled. So on the basis of, I think most of us would agree, was a suit that had no merit, he has now received a payout of $1.776 billion of taxpayer money that can be used as a slush fund for him to pay off whoever he wants. I know he's indicated probably the people who attacked the Capitol on January 6th, the invaders, the rioters. I was here on January 6th. These folks were looking to destroy property, and frankly, if they'd gotten a hold of any elected official, Democrat or Republican, their life would have been in jeopardy. The idea that Trump is going to take taxpayer money and pay them off for their criminal behavior, is there no line that goes too far? And if that wasn't enough, buried in this agreement is a get-out-of-jail-free card for Donald Trump and all his family and all his affiliated companies, that they can no longer be pursued for any tax violations, past or future. Our country is based on the sense that everybody is equal under law. Clearly, this is not an attribute that Donald Trump believes in or subscribes to. And just remember, as those payouts go out, it comes from Virginia's taxpayer dollars. So with that, why don't I turn it back over to Catherine, and we'll go ahead and get started on your questions.
Sir, our first question is from Mark with CBS 19.
Hey, Senator, thanks so much for making the time. Just had a question for you on the War Powers resolution. What are next steps regarding that resolution? And also, as some of these guys fall out of favor with the president, is that why we're seeing, a change in the votes?
Well, it is amazing that when you don't have a political future, you suddenly find courage to do what you talked about doing privately for some time. This war in Iran is hugely unpopular. We're, I think, day 82 or 83. We've not accomplished any of the goals set out. We have an energy crisis that's reflected not only in high gas prices, but it's also reflected in higher fertilizer prices, higher costs for diesel fuel, where most of the products are delivered to market in trucks. Those costs have gone up dramatically. So it is the unpopularity of the war, and it's some new courage found by the fact that you don't have to answer to Donald Trump. The next step will be, and I want to again commend Tim Kaine, he's really led this effort. This was the 8th vote we had. He's been quietly chipping away. This was a procedural vote. Now we actually have to allow it to, the actual resolution to be voted on. Some of these rules are a little arcane. And when we vote on that next, whether it will be this week or when we come back from Memorial Day, and Tim will be able to address that. I think he's got a media avail in a couple hours. I would also point out that because there was a majority reached in the House on their own version of the War Powers Act, you will probably see a House vote this week that very well may pass as well. So finally, the Congress is starting to use some of its constitutionally guaranteed powers. Remember, Congress is supposed to declare war, not simply the president acting on his own. And I sure as heck hope that more Republicans will find their courage to do what they've all said to me privately. Gosh, this war stinks. How are we getting out of this? And the end of the day is, we may end up, the best of the outcomes will us ending up back with an uneasy truce with Iran, and the equivalent of what we had under President Obama, the so-called JCPOA, where we had access to some of Iran's nuclear capabilities and were able to monitor it. Of course, that agreement, which now looks pretty damn good, President Trump tore up in his first term. So the irony will be, if that becomes the new status quo, well, it cost billions and billions to our military, 14 American soldiers killed, and quite honestly, energy prices at record highs that will not come down anytime in the short term.
Senator, our next question is from Michaela with WDBJ7.
Yes. Hi, Senator Warner. What are your thoughts on pausing the federal gas tax, and do you think the Virginia legislature should do the same?
Listen, we need relief. The best way to get relief is, frankly, to end the war. I'd even be willing to put an excess profit tax on some of the oil companies who are making record profits during this war. The Republicans control the legislative process. They have decided not to raise the issue of pausing the gas tax at the federal level. In terms of pausing at the state level, I'm no longer governor, so I'm going to leave that to the governor and the General Assembly. I will say this: the challenge around pauses on the gas tax is it's easy to pause, it's harder to unpause, and we all know, I know out in Southwest Virginia, we've still got a lot of needed improvements on I-81, on 460, on trying to make sure we've got north-south routes down on 220 to Martinsville. So I think any, particularly state legislature, would probably think for a while, because the trigger becomes, once you pause, do you ever unpause it? And if you don't have those revenues, an already fairly bankrupt transportation fund would be further in the red.
Senator, our next question is from Kate with 29 News.
Hi, Senator. Thank you so much for your time. I am reaching out to see if you had any response to Governor Spanberger saying yesterday that she is planning to issue an executive order today relating to the presence of federal agents at the polls. She hasn't released the executive order yet, but she said yesterday that it would essentially create guidelines for how election workers can respond to the presence of federal agents. You've spoken about election security before. I just wanted to see if you had any thoughts on this.
Well, first of all, I've not seen the governor's executive order, but if it does put out guidelines, I would support that. Remember, our election workers do this out of a sense of civic duty. The idea that they could be threatened or harassed, or the idea that you could have federal agents, and whether it be the military, or what would even scare me more is ICE. Remember, you've got many of these ICE agents that have been hired are folks that couldn't get hired by an FBI or a police department. We need to have free and fair elections, and I am extraordinarily concerned that this president or people in his administration could use a false piece of intelligence. And as the vice chair of the Intelligence Committee, I'm following this closely. And that false piece of intelligence be used as an excuse to send troops or ICE to the polls. And if we have a corrupted, federally interfered with election anywhere in our country, then I don't know how we ever return to the norm of free and fair elections. This should not be a partisan issue. Everyone who believes that every vote should be counted should stand up. But I believe the threat is real, and I'm looking forward to seeing what the governor says. And again, you don't have to take my word for it. The President of the United States has said he thinks Republicans ought to take over, particularly the counting in about 15 locations across the country. The President's own words. We've seen his Director of National Intelligence go down and confiscate voting machines in Georgia, totally against the law, totally against her responsibilities. as Director of National Intelligence, where she's supposed to focus on foreign threats, not be involved in domestic criminal activities. So I'm looking forward to what the governor says, and I hope it's going to be a strong executive order. Now, my fear again would be, we have to also preclude this at the federal level, because the idea that the president or his allies would try to federalize elections over a state's governors. This is 2026 in America. We're not in Russia or China where they don't have free elections. Again, I hope any efforts to interfere in the election will be greeted with broad bipartisan pushback.
Senator, our next question is from Michael with Virginia Public Radio.
Hey, Senator, thanks for doing this. I got a question about the letter that you signed with Democrats in the congressional delegation about historical revisionism at the Arlington House involving Robert E. Lee. So there's educational materials that were removed from circulation, and the line at issue here had to do with Robert E. Lee promising to serve the Army to protect the United States in 1861. According to the materials that were yanked, it says he broke his promise and fought for slavery. So those educational materials were yanked from circulation, prompting your letter. The question is this. We're talking about a Junior Ranger activity book. Why is this Junior Ranger activity book so significant, and what would you say about it being removed from circulation?
Well, again, we're going to see this year we celebrate the 250th anniversary of our independence. And this, again, Junior Ranger book that's passed out mostly to children. We're going to see a big upsurge in tourism. And the idea that this administration that's so against American diversity is trying to whitewash, literally and figuratively, our history and Virginia's history is outrageous. I mean, any nation that forgets its history is going to repeat itself. I fear at times with the undermining of the Voting Rights Act, we appear to be doing that. And I don't think there is any lack of factual basis that General Lee, who took an oath to protect the Constitution of the United States, then when Virginia left the Union, he went against that oath. And I don't think you'll find many historians that didn't say one of the major causes of the Civil War was slavery. That's a factual statement. And to take that out, and are we going to suddenly say there was never slavery in America? Are we going to say there was never a period of Jim Crow? Are we going to say in Virginia we never went through massive resistance? It's disrespectful to our history. It's disrespectful particularly to African Americans who were the brunt of a lot of that bias and prejudice. So I absolutely think we cannot allow the altering or whitewashing of our history. We have to tell the good, the bad, the ugly, because that's at the end of the day. Even our founders knew this. In order to form a more perfect union, we are not a perfect union yet, but we are on that path. If we don't continue on that path by simply ignoring the parts of our history that we don't like, then we are going against the very tenets of what the founding fathers established 250 years ago when they declared independence from Britain.
Senator, those are all the questions that we have today.
Okay. Thanks so much, everybody. Take care.